I had an eerie realization in the ICU recently. Multiple rooms, multiple televisions, different families, different nurses, and somehow most of them were playing the exact same movie. Same highlighted choice, same default selection. And I couldn't stop wondering, how much of our lives are we consciously creating? And how much are we just watching the default movie? Hey, welcome back, Shine Tribe. Welcome back to SoulSHINE, the Art of Becoming. I created a companion episode to precede this one. I'll link it in the show notes. We talk about deliberate creation, not manifestation in the simplistic, like think positive and the universe delivers, but deliberate creation as in your expectations, your mental rehearsal, your meaning, and your identity are all shaping the way that you consciously or unconsciously are participating and co-creating your reality. So today in this companion, I want to zoom that out a little bit because we're human and we don't live and create inside of a vacuum. We are part of families, teams, communities, cultures, algorithms, social media feeds. So we are already creating inside of a world that's playing the default movie. So this is how we're going to move through this episode. I'm going to share the story that inspired this episode and this question of what happens when deliberate creation becomes collective. And then we're going to move into the science of groupthink and call out both the benefits and the risks to group creation and how we can do that without losing our discernment, our individuality, or ourselves. And finally, we'll close the episode with an invitation so that you walk away with more than just knowledge, but an actual invitation to transform. So let me back up and tell you the full story. I was pre-rounding, which means that before you gather as a team and discuss your patients, you go in and examine your patients. And usually this is a quiet part of the morning. Families are getting up or getting ready, or maybe they're already out for the day going to work. And there was multiple children that were all already awake. And sometimes the, parents have to go to work. They can't be there. And all of these TVs were on in the morning. And the nurses were all getting settled in and doing their, checks and all of that. And I just noticed what movie was playing in one room because I happen to like the movie. And then I went into the next room and it was the same nurse and the same movie. And I was like, okay, sure. Well, she must have chosen, the same person she chose for both her patients. And then room after room after room, I noticed the majority were all playing the same movie. And I thought, whoa, wait a minute. This isn't just down to the same person anymore. This is across families. This is across different nurses. This is across the hallway. Like, it's not even like someone could have been influenced because they heard the song or heard the scene like a couple doors down. This is in a whole different hallway. And it just got me thinking like, wow, how does that even work? Well, you turn on the TV and it's the same platform. It's the same highlighted recommendation and it's the same default choice. And I thought, okay, this can no longer be random or a coincidence. And it got me thinking about my own experience too. Like you open the app, if you don't intentionally choose something different, you're going to inherit the default highlight or recommendation or the default movie that someone else put out for you to consume or to respond to. And I was just thinking about like the macro version of that. We talked about manifestation a couple of times in SoulSHINE, and the last companion episode is teasing out like manifestation versus deliberate creation. And that's on the individual level. But what about group manifestation? What about collective manifestation? And so as I was creating the companion episode to this one on deliberate creation on the individual level and sharing a little version of that we were in a team, it just got me thinking about even more so on a macro level, on a macro version, like culture. Pick a culture. There's productivity culture. There's burnout culture. There's wellness culture. There is perfectionism. There is worth that's tied to achievement. There's hustle culture. There's consuming and scrolling culture. So without pausing to ask myself, like, wait, did I actually choose this? Or is this simply the default movie? The inherited role that was given to me, the inherited expectation, the highlighted recommendation. And it really just got me thinking, like, yes, we are always creating on an individual level, but we are always creating on a communal level, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And I know some people are going to hear like, oh, collective manifestation or collective consciousness. And some people lean in and some people like running out the room, which I love. Bring your skepticism, bring your passion, because I'm talking about something really ordinary and I think a lot more fascinating, which is how humans influence one another in measurable ways. We influence our nervous systems, our expectations, our behaviors, our beliefs. How does one person influence my courage when another person influences my fear? How am I in some rooms and my sense of what's normal and what's possible is one way, and I'm in other rooms and my sense of what's normal and possible is completely different? How do other people influence what is safe, what is worth trying for? And this is where the science is really interesting. As usual, I will link the studies in the show notes, but researchers studying teams using functional MRIs, so that's brain scans, and EEGs, which is the electricity of your brain, show that when humans work towards a shared goal, get this, our brains synchronize. And I know I've like heard this before, especially in like meditative states, how your brain waves synchronize, but in groups. And of course, there's these phenomenons of groupthink, but to know that electrically we synchronize, not like metaphorically, although also metaphorically, but measurably, I think that is so fascinating and wild. When we have shared intentionality, we produce patterns of brain-to-brain coupling that predict collective performance. That is wild. So humans quite literally think together. There's also research on something that I didn't know until I researched it for this episode called collective effervescence, which sounds really beautiful and exciting, but it means that there's a shared emotional experience that generates a feeling of connection, of cohesion, of shared meaning, and collective possibility. That sounds beautiful, but I want you to think about this. Think about that concert. Think about that protest. Think about that team victory. Think about a spiritual gathering or a group prayer. Think about debriefing after a difficult save or case or project. All of these have a shared emotional experience that then fosters connection or cohesion with a group or shared meaning. What brings you together in that protest? Your shared values. What brings you together in that team victory? The shared joy and celebration. What brings you together in a concert? The shared energy of the music. All of these places, whether the meaning is deep or heavy, or whether the meaning is light and fun, there is meaning that happened. And people leave feeling even more connected, more courageous, more joyful, more human. And I think this is so beautifully supportive. And just, I love finding science that puts language to something that we're already experiencing as magical and beautiful and can measure it. So there's something from all of this behavioral literature that is really cool, and it's called the we plans. So it's not like I will do this when X happens. It's we will do this when X happens. So groups that form collective implementation intentions outperform individual planning. I'm going to say that again because that was a lot of words and it's important. Groups that form collective plans that have collective intentions outperform a whole bunch of people who wants to do the best, who wants to serve the best, who wants to hit the goal, but they're just planning by themselves, than groups who come together and create a plan together or have an intention together. Why? Because cooperation changes persistence. It changes accountability. And it changes your coordinated action. Think about that. So in other words, humans don't simply change because we're isolated individuals and we're just happening to do something in parallel to each other. No, we co-regulate, we co-reinforce, we co-create. And honestly, that realization changes so much about how I think about transformation itself. And I want to pause here because I think sometimes in like this professional development, personal development, spiritual development work, like everything sounds so good and everything is so powerful and everything is so wonderful. And we only look at the important benefits of it, which is important. But I recently heard someone at a conference on like spirituality and psychedelics say that if something is potent enough to create an effect, it's potent enough to create a risk or a side effect. And it shocked me when he asked me that because he was asking a chaplain who like a loving, kind man who's service oriented and wants the best for these families, going in, having these beautiful conversations and helping families navigate. Like, what could be the risk to that? What could be the side effect to that? Like, I get it if you're talking about plant, psychedelics and medications, like absolutely they have side effects. We should all be aware. But when he asked that to the chaplain, I was like, whoa, I need to be asking this so much more of coaching and of spiritual work and of personal professional work. Because you know what? He has a point. If something is potent enough to create an effect, then it's potent enough to create a risk or a side effect. So I wanted to bring that into this whole group think thing, because even though I just presented us with so many cool benefits of like brain synchronicity and performance measures, I think this is so mature because one of the core values that I hold and that soulSHINE holds is each person's agency and their autonomy. And yes, community is beautifully powerful. Shared rituals are beautifully powerful. Collective meaning, powerful. Synchronization, powerful. And I want to return always us back to your discernment of where this fits in for you and for your journey. And I'm going to bring in the research also that shows the trade-offs. So the same research that shows where synchrony increases cohesion also shows the trade-offs of conformity, of sort of an in-group bias, of reduced creativity, of moral blind spots, and identity fusion. So we have a tendency as humans to collapse our own personal discernment when the group is so certain. And I know I have lived that before too. Like, okay, everything inside of me is saying, I don't agree with this, or I don't think this is right, but the whole group thinks this is so certain. So I'm going to put my discernment to the side. And that's important to be aware of and to hold space for. And there's even research in meditation, mindfulness, and contemplative practices that, of course, show that these tools are profoundly helpful. But in some individuals and in some contexts, it can produce adverse experiences, dysregulated arousal, dissociation, anxiety, and destabilization. So I'm telling you this because I believe in your maturity. I believe in your discernment, and I believe that transformation and these conversations require us to say that beautiful things can still require caution and wisdom, and belonging can be beautiful, and also belonging can become groupthink, and optimism can be beautiful, and optimism can become toxic positivity, and shared purpose can be beautiful, and shared purpose can become pressure. And so I want to be mindful of how I shepherd this space, because I'm biased to the things that I'm biased to, and I don't know the things that I don't know. This is why your voice and your experience matters as well. I also want to be mindful of echo chambers and people outsourcing their knowing. And I've been in the full rooms where you still feel lonely. And I've been in the places where you've worked so hard to reclaim your expression. And then you join a group that you think is like you, and it sounds beautiful. And then you sort of kind of meld into the group again. And I just offer it all back to each one of us in our fullest empowerment and agency, and reframe it that healthy community should deepen our relationship to ourselves, not replace it. And it's important for all of us, of course, to be challenged and deconstruct our own limits and create space. And it's important for all of us to know ourselves deeply and know what in this season is unwavering. And so these conversations require a blend of discernment and of being conscious to the realities that you are practicing as an individual, that we are practicing together in this space. And these are some of the core foundational philosophies that I built soulSHINE with, and that I built into my own group program. I built Awaken, which is a culmination of 5 years of me learning these cognitive emotional tools, of my own journey, of my own becoming, just as a way to formulate and document the tools that I was learning on purpose, on power, and on creation. And it's a 12-week signature journey that I created for other people on their journeys to support them. And I think sometimes people can hear like, join this community, join this thing, learn this tool, learn this strategy, as if it's the know-all, end-all solution to everything. And that's not my philosophy or my intention for the spaces within soulSHINE. They are built to be spaces not for you to outsource your knowing, not as spaces where positive thinking replaces reality, but as contemplative practices, as space for you to know you more deeply, space where there can be experiences of spirit and soul and mysticism and energy, and spaces of science and language and mechanisms, spaces of emotional tools and of curiosity, of self-awareness, of identity, spaces of both your own individual journey and of a communal relational journey where possibility is expanded because you're in rooms of people who believe that it's possible, and it facilitates that belief in you of who you want to be, of how you want to live with more truth, more courage, more heart. And beneath all of this, whether it's communal or individual, one foundational principle that I always return back to and would invite in all of these soulSHINE episodes, in Awaken, in soulSHINE as a company, is that you are your own authority always. And I love that story of the elephant and the 6 blind men, where they're each touching a different part of an elephant. And they all have a blinder, a mask on. They can't see. So one is describing, the tail, and it's thin and it's moving quickly. And another's describing, the foot and the nails and the weight of it. Another's describing a trunk. And I love that analogy because it reminds us that, of course, we're all going to have these different experiences of the same elephant. And one experience doesn't invalidate the other. But if we invite it to add richness to my understanding of what the tail is like in context of the trunk and the foot, and vice versa, how do I enrich my own understanding of the elephant? How do I contemplate this together with you? How do I use it for my expansion, your expansion? How do I sharpen my discernment even more? How do I get a little bit more detailed on describing this tail to you because all you know is the foot, And we practice this together, and we experiment together, and we remember ourselves with more clarity and with more honesty in a way that only brings us back more home to ourselves. And it's so foundational to me into how I think about running the space and running the container and running the company, because this is not just about me and you and now us as a community. What about our place in the larger world? What about our impact? What about our contribution? What about the way we look at reciprocity? What about even things so simple as money? Because if our becoming is collective, then how resources move through the world matters too. Time as a resource. How do I show up here week after week, giving into the world for free, believing in people's power and purpose and what can empower them? And how do I value that as a resource? How do I create, experiences with inequity in mind? I don't think you can disentangle personal growth from collective growth as completely separate conversations, because even within this collective conversation, we can see how deeply intertwined they are. Who we become shapes how we lead, how we love, how we build, how we vote, how we spend, what systems we reinforce, and what future we are making more possible, not just for us, but for those around us. So one of the things that I am so proud of that I have built into soulSHINE is this idea of global connection. And I'm excited to see how the future of it continues to evolve. But with every purchase inside the company, whether it's a group program, whether it's a private mentorship, a mastermind, an offering, whatever it is, that every purchase contributes by your choosing towards global women's leadership, global humanitarian medical care, or restoration of the earth around us. And we have a special section on the website that highlights the charities that we've partnered with. And those charities were chosen based off of some of the values that were built into soulSHINE. And this obviously isn't because buying a program of self-help saves the world, but it was important for me to build a company that practices the values that it teaches, that truly believes that becoming is not only personal. I truly believe that it does ripple out, that it does reinforce the environments around us, that we are part of co-creating our culture and our world, that we are always participating in collective becoming. The question goes back to, are we doing it consciously or unconsciously? And so if today stirred something in you, if you've realized that your becoming doesn't happen in isolation and you are curious about practicing these ideas more deeply, I would love to share with you a free next experience that I created called the Mini Awaken. And it is another dedicated space where thoughtful humans can continue to grow when they have space to contemplate, to question, and to practice, deliberately practice together, where we can have space to contemplate what science supports and also what the soul is yearning to experience with your discernment, with your heart, with your values as the guiding light of your experience. So I will put a link below with all of the details for both the Mini Awaken experience as well as the 12-week Awaken journey in the show notes. And for our ending tradition, I want to close with this invitation for your transformation for this week. So today or this week, I want you to notice the default movie. Just choose one area. Maybe it's in your work, your family, your industry, the way you talk to yourself, your definition of success, your relationship with resting, your relationship to worth. It could be anything. And just ask yourself first, what belief is the default belief? What belief is just playing because everyone around me inherited it, and that's what I inherited it too. And now I want you to ask yourself, what do I deliberately choose to believe about this thing? It can be one belief, one conversation, one ritual, one boundary, one tiny experiment, one small act of conscious creation, and see what becomes possible. Wishing you all play, possibility, and peace. Wishing you to feel supported in this space, and I am so honored to be a part of your soul tribe. I am sending you love, and I'll see you next week.